Hello, my name is Elijah Debor. I'm an 11th grader at Kingsland. This week, Pastor Rush started a new sermon series called Love Where You Live. And he began by saying that barriers right now between us and our neighbors are lower than they've ever been. In the time that we live in, we can't really use all of our old excuses. We can't use the excuse of I'm busy to not love people because we're not busy and we're stuck in our homes and we have all this extra time to actually go out and serve as we're called to do. The scripture that he used was Matthew 22:34 through 40. And in this scripture, a Pharisee comes to Jesus and he asks him, "What is the greatest commandment?" And Jesus replies with this: "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." And so the first thing that he gets from this is what he calls the proximity principle. I've heard the word neighbor, and he said that the word neighbor has been applied. People say, well, my neighbor is everybody, and everybody I meet is my neighbor, which is true in the sense that God does want us to love everybody and everybody we interact with. As Pastor Rush pointed out, the Greek word that they use in the scripture, it comes from a word implying nearness or being close to, so that the word that they mean does actually mean your direct neighbors, the people actually living next to you. He said that God placed us near certain people for a reason, and it's not an accident that we're by the people we're by. On pretty much every single street in America and around the world, you're going to find somebody who's in need and somebody who needs to be loved on and somebody that you can help. For instance, my neighbor right next to me is an old man who lives alone, and so we've been bringing him meals and really just talking, because what I found is that obviously living alone in his house and he can't really leave, I bet it gets really lonely. So sometimes I'll go over, and if I bring him a meal, he'll just start asking me my name and where I go to school and my plans for the future, and we'll start talking on and on to where I'm like, okay, that's enough. But like, he needs love and he needs people like us to be able to be there and care for him. And I think that that's what God calls us to do. And there's people like that in every neighborhood. There's people that we can go and we can love on in these times. The second thing that he found was what he called the kindness principle, which is, what does it mean to love your neighbor? I think that it means to imitate Jesus' love, which means it's selfless and doesn't demand reciprocity. There's no hidden agenda. You're not trying to love them so that you can get something out of it, or that they'll love you back, or you'll look cool, or you can be a better Christian. But it's a genuine care for the people around us, genuinely being a part of their lives, planting the seed and letting God make it grow, instead of just trying to do it all of ourselves. And I really like the last verse in what he read, Matthew 22:40, because it says, "On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." And it's really interesting that every law that God gives us comes from these two commands. Love is the foundation of Jesus' ministry and his teaching. It's everything that he talked about was love. And it's because when we love God, we love what he loves, and he loves people. And I really agree with what Pastor Rush said, that it's time to put an emphasis on loving those that are around us.